and we delivered. Well, you didn't actually ask, but we delivered anyway. Troy Hunt is our first guest on the show, and we talked to him about hard work, achieving success, protecting your privacy, and many more security-related topics. Joel even manages not to offend him. Much. This time on the Dane and the Pain, filled with aged cheese and expensive champagne.
And we're back on the Dane and the Pain. This time we've got a special guest, Joel, and there's something we've advertised a little bit, but we've got Mr. Hunt. Mr. Troy Hunt is on the line. I will formally introduce him in a minute, but first, Joel, how you been? How's your hair?
No, that's funny. So you know that I'm extremely cheap, and one of the ways that we save money is my wife cuts my hair, and Anne cut my hair the other night, and she was a little out of it. I went to work this morning, and I had two coworkers look at my head and go, "What happened to your hair?" Which I think is interesting because, usually, people don't comment on your hair, right? I mean, as a guy, has anybody have you ever gone to any place and had, somebody comment on your hair? I don't know, Troy, your hair looks perfect all the time, at least in all your shots online.
Yes.
I can't imagine you ever have that happen. But anyways, that's my day. I had
Well, with that, I think
they comment on it. They just say it's perfect. But that's
Gee, thanks for that, Joel. That was more than I expected. But let me just introduce Troy formally here. Troy Hunt, he's an Australian web security expert. He's a regional director for Microsoft, which means he doesn't work for Microsoft, which maybe many people think. He's an MVP in data security, I believe it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Troy. And he lives in sunny Gold Coast in Australia, where he works from home doing Pluralsight courses and the Have I Been Pwned website, as well as blogging on troyhunt.com. So welcome to the show, Troy.
From home, from planes, from jet ski, whatever is convenient.
This is true.
Yeah, hey, well, thanks for having me here, guys.
So you are officially our first guest on the show. So bear with us because we have no idea still what we're doing. But so what have you been up to lately, Troy? Because there was some post that I read recently about your travels, and there seemed to be quite frequently.
Yeah, so I have had 5, I guess, big trips this year to various parts of the world. So for those of you that are not in Australia, you may not know, but Australia is the other side of the world to literally everything other than New Zealand, and we really don't count them anyway. Everywhere we go is just a massive trip. So I actually only had one trip to the States this year. States isn't too bad because I can get there in one hop, at least to West Coast. But 4 trips to Europe, and I wrote just a couple of weeks ago before the time recording about just how much effort goes into one of these trips, because I'm really conscious that people like to pick up on the shiny bits of what travel and conference speaking, etc. involves. And in fairness, we share the shiny bits, right? Like we want to go, hey, look, this is an awesome spot, or I've had a great time. And when we have those sort of darker moments or depressing times, or there's occasions where you can't sleep and you're jet lagged and all the rest of it, you don't tend to tweet that stuff.
No one really wants to know, do they?
No, and hey, look, I mean, even if you're not traveling and even if you're not sort of twittering and that sort of thing, you just look at your Facebook friends, right? It's normally the positive stuff. So I wanted to write something that captured everything. And as I went along over this trip, which went for about 3 weeks, I just captured each day. And it ended up being an 11,500 word blog post, which is long even by my standards. But it sort of has everything in there. So if folks are interested in sort of the upsides and the downsides of this, that might be an interesting read.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I know from experience as well that it's not just the time that you spent traveling, it's also the time you spent preparing for it. Because there are, 2 or 3 conferences, there might be some workshops you're doing, depending on, especially in your case. There might be some recordings, there might be interviews, there might be whatever it is. All of this stuff needs to be prepared for as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. There is a lot of prep in advance, and it's sometimes a little bit hard to tell how much because you try and multi-purpose stuff. So I did 5 two-day workshops while I was away. I did 3 conference talks in 3 different countries. I did a long user group talk, a bunch of other things. Finished editing a Pluralsight course while I was flying. It was a lot of stuff to do together, and there would have been many days worth of preparation for that. And then you come home, and for the next week, I still wasn't sleeping properly. Particularly when you fly east, I find it tends to really knock you about. So it's quite a mission to do these, and yeah, look, hopefully that gives people some more insight into what actually goes on.
Yeah, it is interesting because, as you said, we always only share the 1 hour cruise we do in a full week or whatever it might be. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Do go and read that blog post on tryhard.com because it's quite a good read. It does take a while to read though, so there's a fair.
Hey, you can always look at the pictures if you don't want to read the words. I do it all the time. I go to other people's blogs and I'm like, yeah, scroll through, find the good stuff. So there's lots of pictures for people that are interested.
So,
are you dumbing down your audience?
So the things that I thought were kind of interesting, Troy, in reading that. Well, there were 2 things. One is, and I'm curious you might expand on. You mentioned repeating yourself when you do these talks over and over again. And I know in my own head when I'm working and when I'm meeting with folks, I'm always sort of questioning, now have I used this before? Is this, have I told this story before? And that's one thing I saw you sort of questioning yourself. And then the other part that I thought was really interesting is you saved a bit about your family, about your wife's health issues to the end. And I think that also sort of spoke to me, the notion that, when you go out and you're on stage and you're doing these presentations, you have your game face, but in fact, you have a life and you have, the same problems that, everybody else does. And those 2 things sort of struck me as pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess I'm in the same boat as many people in that I've got a wife, I've got a couple of little kids, and you have to balance all this. And I only do what I do as much as I do because she's very supportive of that as well. So we have these discussions about travel. In fact, I need to talk to her today about my next trip, which will be back to UK and Europe again in Jan. And we sort of have to make the decisions about what makes sense. It's it works out very well financially to go and do these trips. Yet I'm away from the family, but it massively improves the quality of life when I'm home. So, I have days like today where it was take the kids to school, go and visit my parents and have a coffee, pick the kids up, have a swim. I think I did some work. I don't know, I got up at 5 a.m, so I started kind of early, and I'll probably go late tonight. But that's kind of the trade-off, right, where it gives you more luxuries on the flip side about how you manage your life when you're not in those intense periods of travel. Well,
so one of the things that, I'd kind of bounced around notions in my own head about what I'd want to ask you about. And I've read a lot of your blog posts and sort of read up a little bit about you. And, generally when you're speaking, you're not speaking to someone like me necessarily. You're speaking to crowds who are IT professionals. And I sort of consider myself as an average or more average user. And the thing about security that I think most people really want to know about is, what, for an individual who has maybe a PC at home or a Chromebook, they bank online, maybe they do some of their banking, some of their bill paying online, they have the mobile device. What is the area that you think for that average user is most risky for either, having data stolen, shared, whatever the case may be? I know that's kind of general, but, what advice do you have?
Well, I guess there's a couple of things there. And first is that I'm finding I'm increasingly spending time speaking to other audiences as well. So just before I went away on this trip, I did a talk at an edutech conference. So this was teachers. And my sister-in-law's very involved in that space. So I did a talk to, I guess, a few hundred different teachers that were there at this event who have sort of good technical capabilities in terms of they're very good with iPads and PowerPoint or Keynote as it may be, because they're all Apple people, and they live in that world. But the whole sort of concept of security was very foreign to them. So the sorts of things that I was talking to them about were I guess a lot of it is to try and both scare and educate. And the scare thing is kind of funny insofar as we all laugh a little bit when people get worried about how bad it is. But it's impactful too, and it leaves people thinking about it. So, I showed things like, here's how easy it is to hijack the Wi-Fi traffic of your phone. And, I got a little device that's very good at that, and teachers see their iPads and their MacBook Pros and things suddenly appear on the screen, and we all laugh a lot, and then they hopefully remember something from that event. And that leads us into talking about things like VPNs, and there are very good consumer-orientated, very easy-to-use VPNs out there. Obviously, passwords. Spoke a lot about passwords, and we know that the general population is absolutely rubbish at managing passwords and creating passwords. So talk a lot about that, and that is one of the most fundamental things that everyday people can sort out too, because it is something that we use day in, day out, non-stop. And it is a constant source of pain for people when their accounts get popped because someone's hacked LinkedIn and they've got their password and cracked it. And that sort of thing just happens every single day. There's probably a component as well here in terms of what most people should be thinking about, which is the trust decisions they make around emails. So we see phishing just being enormously successful. And a lot of the time when we see news about Twitter has been hacked, and it could be anyone from Tesla's been hacked, Burger King's been hacked, Associated Press has been hacked. And when we see those, it's someone who's given their Twitter account to someone else who sent them an email and literally asked them for it. It'll be like it'll be a phishing attack. Hey, your $1 million is waiting. All you got to do is just fill in your details on this page, and guess what? They've just given away their credentials. We see that sort of stuff happen all the time, and it's not abating.
So is it a matter of us as normal users being more careful with what we give out, or just in general just actually paying attention? Because I've also seen American talk shows where they go out on the street and they talk to random people and say, "Oh, so what's your password?" And they won't tell you. And then they ask questions immediately after, which is, related to how to guess the password. And they just answer them, and the password is right there. Are people really that stupid?
Well, and also, Troy, what got me on this was, I think you'd posted something about a little rant about people when you go into the Apple store and they want you to unlock the device to do some work on it, and I think your point was, well, you shouldn't have to give them an unlocked device, and I might be misstating that, and so that was one thing that drew me to that. The other thing I was kind of wondering though is it the risk greater that your data will be stolen from a larger entity like you just mentioned, or is a risk as great that your individual account may be hacked? Right. For the average user, there's nothing they can do about, Bank of America getting hacked. So what? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's I guess for context, the Apple thing the other day was my iPhone has a bit of a crackly speaker. When you take a call on it and you put your phone to the ear, it feels like there's something, maybe a little bit of dirt or something in there, or the speaker's a bit loose and it just resonates a bit too much. So I thought, I'll go into the Apple store and they'll take a look at it and they'll hit it with some compressed air, or they might even just hand me over a new phone, which they've done in the past. And the guy, he takes the phone and he says, can you unlock it so he can get the serial number and everything? Yeah, no dramas, because we're standing there next to each other. And then he's like, all right, I just got to take it out the back. And I went, sure, let me just lock it. And he's like, no, you can't do that. I was like, well, you can't take the phone away. This is how it's going to work. There's no way in the world you are taking my unlocked phone. And he's going, well, I can't help you. And I kind of looked at him and went, do you seriously get people to unlock their phone and then give it to a stranger whilst you go away into the back room? And he's like, yeah, all the time. So, oh my God, here's a blog post. And this is precisely what happens. And I think where maybe you were leading with this, Joel, is that this is, from an education perspective, it is just terrible. And it's also so inconsistent with Apple's messaging. So think back to the whole San Bernardino thing with the shooters and the FBI, and the Apple wouldn't unlock the iPhone. And really the headline here was that these iPhones have got such good crypto built into them that even the FBI couldn't get in. Well, they did eventually get in, but allegedly they spent $1 million to unlock it. That's how good these are.
Wow,
and then some
impressive.
bloke says, yeah, just unlock it for me. You know, and you can almost see that the two sides of the brain, the Apple brain, fighting with each other, because there's the side which is like privacy first. We respect our users. We're literally making a value proposition out of privacy. And then there's the other side, which is make everything as easy and usable as possible and make the experience frictionless. And it all sort of came to a head in that Apple store that day. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to fix it by giving them more money. So I will, and bear with me, there's logic in this. I was looking for a good excuse to upgrade my iPhone anyway and get an iPhone 7, particularly because I want that 1080p front-facing camera, because I do a few video recordings now. And it's only $720 on the 6S, so yeah, I'll go in, I'll get the new phone, I will restore the new phone, I'll get the new phone working perfectly, and then I'll just blitz the old phone, they can fix it, and then I'll eBay it, and hey, they might even give me a brand new one, and then I'll be able to eBay a brand new phone. You know, there's method in my madness here, guys.
You're working the system, I like it.
So is one of the other things I'd heard mentioned recently is that the risk isn't necessarily that someone gets into your phone or your account and steals something, but that they leave something behind, whether it be malicious code or some script running in the background. You conceivably drip a few cents out of your account every day for the rest of your life, that kind of a deal. Is that something that you're seeing a lot of, or is that a real sort of threat, or is that just sort of speculation or stuff I've been hearing?
Look, I'm honestly not too worried about that at the banking level, and there are a few reasons for that. And one is that banks have an enormous amount of fraud detection within their processes, and anything that was sort of in there trying to siphon out money in a suspicious fashion tends to get flagged pretty early. In fact, I donated today. I gave Let's Encrypt $50 because I've got a campaign running, and within about 30 seconds of me pledging them $50, I got an SMS from American Express which said, "This is unusual. Are you sure you want to do this? Respond with a 1 for yes or a 2 for no." And they picked that up really, really quickly because that was an unusual behaviour, I assume, insofar as they were taking donations via an organisation I hadn't used. They're online, it's a card not present sort of scenario. So, I get that. So banks are pretty resilient to that. I am honestly more worried about malicious software running on a machine. And I'm not worried about the iOS devices because they're sandboxed to such a huge extent that it's very, very hard to happen. It's one of the reasons I have iOS devices. I'm a bit more worried about the PCs. And in fact, about a week ago, I put in a new network at home. I've got all this Ubiquiti stuff now, which is absolutely awesome. I'd love to talk about Ubiquiti. And one of the things it does is it gives you really, really good visibility into all the traffic that's coming from all the devices. And I got up one morning, I was like, oh my God, there's like 1.5 gigabytes has been uploaded from my PC overnight. What's happened? Like there is somebody in my PC, they're sending things. And I was kind of in a bit of a panic because I couldn't explain the traffic until the penny dropped that I do have a cloud backup process that runs out of hours, and I had just published a bunch of Pluralsight stuff and it would have synced and then uploaded. But I am just really, really conscious that on PCs there are a lot of malicious products that get installed, sometimes through no fault of your own. Sometimes they're drive-by installs. It's like, hey, you've got Java installed. Don't install Java, folks. But you've got Java installed. And you have browsed to a mainstream news site and they have had malicious software in the ad system, and it has literally dropped something nasty in your machine as you've driven past. And that worries me just about more than anything from a personal perspective.
Don't install Java. That's going to be the headline for the podcast.
Don't install Java, Flash, or Silverlight. You do not need these things.
This is true.
And if someone tells you they do, well, actually, I say this as someone who has to run Java in order to do my tax, because our government has a requirement if you're a business customer to run Java. So I have it only running in IE, which I don't use for anything else because it's IE, and I just use that for my tax.
Just come out and say what you really think.
That's amazing.
This is the great thing about Microsoft's programs. We're all independent. We say exactly what we love and what we hate, and that's what it is. And,
well, I think Lars had some questions for you.
Yeah, I had another angle on this, because you were talking about privacy before, and something like I appreciate what you're saying, that Apple is taking privacy really serious, right? And it came through in this survey, I guess. It was Amnesty International, actually. I don't know why they did it, but it came out through them, and they were talking about privacy in messaging apps. So we're talking about Facebook Messenger, messaging, iMessages, FaceTime, all that sort of stuff. And Apple scored really, really high because they take this stuff serious. But is there a point where you don't use messaging services? I'm not talking particularly you in your case, Troy, because I know you use secure methods, but in general users, is there a point where they should be worried about using these services? Because people share all kinds of data. At one point when I worked for a company, we had to install this third-party app that would encrypt MSN Messenger, when that existed, messages so that they couldn't be caught by third parties. And now, Facebook Messenger, for example, and Apple are really, really good. They're sort of the top of the line of services that you use. But something like Snapchat is used by God knows how many people. And on this survey, or this analysis or review, they scored really low. Like they have no way of securing your data or applying any privacy rules to it. I'm a bit worried for all our youth that are all living on this.
There are so many interesting things here, and I mean, maybe if we start with Snapchat, if you got end-to-end encryption with your Snapchat conversations, so that let's say it was you and I, Lars, and we were chatting on Snapchat, and it's encrypted on your device, it goes through all the networks and all the servers encrypted, then it lands on my machine. If you're sending me the sort of stuff that I understand people send on Snapchat, and please don't do that, that's not an invitation, but if you were to send me, let's politely put it as photos of little Lars through to my phone, this is why you don't have guests, through to my phone, and I was to then take that, and it was encrypted all the way, right? No one got in the middle. Mm-hmm. But I was to then keep that on my phone, and I was to then save that offline, or I was to show my friends. And this is literally what happens with Snapchat. We've still got a problem. And I think that the demographic of that particular style of application and the people that use it and the purposes it's frequently used for, it's sort of a very different threat actor. The threat actor is the friends of the person you give it to and the propensity of that person to redistribute material in an unauthorized fashion, even after it's arrived on their device. So I think that's quite a different scenario. I also think that the conversation about what messaging service you should use for what, or what discussions you should have, is very important. Mm-hmm. And I'm really conscious that even with the likes of, say, now Facebook Messenger's end-to-end, we've got WeChat, we've got iMessage, all end-to-end encrypted. Look, that is great for having discussions where you don't want someone eavesdropping in the middle, but you've still got records of these chats that are sitting on the other end. I've had a few cases recently, even today actually, where I've been talking to someone about a security incident, and I said, look, let's talk on the phone. I would much rather talk on the phone because the chances of there being a record of that are significantly lower. It's not going to be stored anywhere by default. It was actually via FaceTime audio, which was encrypted end to end. Mm-hmm. So short of him actually manually recording it on his end, which I'm sure he wasn't doing, that is a truly off the record conversation. And I think it's hard to beat. And I mean, take that even further, a face-to-face chat. That obviously only works in certain scenarios. But there's a lot of conversations which I would prefer to have offline because I've got a much higher degree of confidence that there's no record of them.
But then sometimes you are just not able to do that, and you will have to use either email or you can use. I I'm almost at a point now where I don't mind whatever technology I use to message to people. Although when it comes to, say, I need to send a credit card number or something, I'll send some of it on email, some of it on Facebook, some of it on Skype, for example, because I am aware that some of these bits are stored somewhere. But there is a point where you have to use some of these services, and I'm just very aware that where do you draw
I think
the line?
earlier, Lars, you or Troy, you pointed out that you got a note from your credit card saying they had received a request for funds or whatever, and that's an example. Banks, I know that pretty much seems like every financial institution or most of the sites that I use will send you these notes via SMS to verify you're logging on, that it's actually you. So it seems like they're using a system that may be wholly to, as part of their own security. I mean, do you see where I'm getting?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, right? Because how does your everyday person make a decision about this? And what makes it even trickier, when I got this message from Amex today, I almost thought about screen capping it and sharing it socially, because I thought this is good, right? It's a good security control. And then I realized that within the SMS was actually, I think, the last 5 digits of my credit card. And they've sent this over SMS, which is an insecure communications channel or an unsecured channel. It's not encrypted by default. And this is information which is regularly used for identity verification. And there have been some really interesting precedents in the past where attackers have obtained usually the last 4 digits of a card, because they might be able to socially engineer that out of a service who doesn't treat it as particularly sensitive, and then use that as information to identify themselves to another service. So I think it's an interesting paradox here where we see different organizations putting different levels of sensitivity on the same data assets, and also different levels of sensitivity on communication channels. So we have for quite some time considered SMS to be a good channel of identity verification. And now we've increasingly seen SIM card hijacking, where people have literally socially engineered the call centers. So they've called up, let's say, your local telco and said, hey, I'm Jimbo and I've lost my SIM or lost my phone. Here's enough information to give you some degree of confidence that I am who you think I am. Can I please have the SIM now? And they get someone else's SIM. So now we're seeing the likes of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, actually say, well, we should stop doing this. We should actually stop trusting SMS as a channel of identity verification or sending anything of any sort of criticality over there, because this stuff happens so much.
Is your sense in it, since you travel and you're, as you did, opposite sides of the world, is your sense that these issues are regional, or are they sort of, the United Nations of security issues? Are they the same everywhere?
Oh, look, I think it transcends all borders. We're all sort of working in this one globalized internet economy. We're using globalized services most of the time. Even the services that we use locally are still connected to the world. We had I don't know if funny is the right word, but interesting incident here in August when we ran our 5-yearly census, where we collect data from all these Australians, ran it online for the first time, and they tried to restrict it just to Australian audiences in order to avoid attacks, and they still got DDoSed off the internet. So it's, I just shudder at most of the activities that happen that try to sort of work on the assumption of people are in different locations, therefore certain things can and can't happen.
Lars, do you mind if I ask another question? So I kind of am curious about, Troy, about in the States in particular, and I work in healthcare, and so I'm sort of, that's an area where I might feign expertise. There's a lot of examples of ransomware in healthcare facilities. And I seem to only see those reports coming out of the United States. And so I don't know that much about the healthcare systems in the rest of the world. Are you familiar with that? Is that something you could speak to a little bit?
Yeah, so certainly the ransomware situation has made a lot of press globally. One of the big US ones in healthcare was the Hollywood Presbyterian center, which got hit earlier this year. And they ended up, I believe, paying the ransom. I think it was somewhere around $17,000 US, which is, quite a seems like quite a large sum. But from memory, in fact, I actually did a free course on ransomware for a company called Varonis, and I think the figure that I found was that just for their CT scans, they were charging like $100,000 a day in fees. So, yeah, when you think about ransomware taking down your network and rendering you unable to perform those activities, if someone goes and says, yeah, just give me like 18% of your daily revenue and we'll make it go away, well, hey, good deal, right? And that is extremely worrying. That is happening in other places. There was a story here. We've actually got a suburb here on the Gold Coast called Miami, and there was one several years ago about a doctor's surgery in Miami getting hit with ransomware as well. And, they're just two immediate examples that come to mind. My mother-in-law's been hit with ransomware. Asked me how happy I was to get that phone call. And it is something that just happens the world over, and it's indiscriminate. These malicious software products that infect people are not going, hey, let's just get Americans. Like they are just running all over the place.
Yes, the rest of the world. The story that I saw today was from actually the part of the National Health Service in England, where they shut down 2 days of surgeries. Obviously, their system is a little bit different than ours, but I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, look, it's everywhere. This is the short answer.
That was actually what I was going to say, is that if you're in a particular industry such as healthcare, it's present there, and it will be present pretty much anywhere that IT is involved, which is more and more places. So I want to just change gears just a little bit, because we were talking about this briefly earlier, at the beginning, about traveling and whatnot. And I know, Troy, that you have a few stories that you were mentioning to us earlier before we started recording, and I thought we would just touch on some of those, because one thing that people don't realize, and this is for myself to some degree as well, and probably you as well, Joel, is that when we do get these gigs, say we get to, you did the keynote at the NDC also last year in front of 2,000 people. I'm going to Poland in December. I'm going to Sweden on Friday. We're doing all these things, but it's the old saying of overnight success takes years. And a lot of people that I talk to often have the comment of saying, oh my God, you're so lucky. And that is just the last thing that it is. And I thought I just wanted you to share some of the stories I get of the lesser glamorous side of let's call it success, because we do like what we're doing, and we're fortunate enough to be able to do exactly what we love doing. But I don't know if you're keen for that.
Yeah, and the first thing that always comes to mind when people talk about the luck is that old saying about the harder you work, the luckier you get. so I kind of like true. That. And in fact, what we were talking about just earlier on, for everyone else's reference also, was this sort of, in Australia, we would often call it tall poppy syndrome as well, where people get a bit cranky if they see someone else who's done kind of well at something. And like, now's probably a good time to tune out if that's you. Sorry, I don't want to tell your audiences to stop listening, but you understand the context. But I guess going back to your point, the reality of it is that there are huge amounts of hard work, and of course there's degrees, and I find that I'm starting to try and do more and more on the trips I have, because there's always like this calculator in my head that's going like, what's the highest and best use of my time while I'm away? Like, what's the best ROI I can get on the time away? And that's not just dollars, that's also the number of events I can do, the people I can see, the connections I can make. But it means that very regularly when I do these trips, and each one of these 5 big trips I've done this year have been the same, I'll arrive somewhere late at night, it's dark, I don't know where I am, I've got Google Maps, I'm figuring it out, I sort of land at a hotel somewhere, I have to get up early, I'm still jet lagged. I normally don't know where I'm going until I kind of pull the iPad out and look at the map. Am I walking? Do I have to figure out the public transport? Is someone meeting me? And then go and do the same thing day in, day out, which I do enjoy, but it certainly does get repetitive by the 10th day that you've done it in one trip. And then you normally get to the end of it and people want to socialise, which is great, but it ends up being 10, 11 o'clock at night and you've been up since 5 or 6 in the morning, and then just like lather, rinse and repeat for 3 weeks non-stop. The trip I just had, I had 1 day off in the 3 weeks where I didn't have some form of commitment. And certainly a couple of those days were leisurely commitments, but it was still like, all right, got to get up, go here, do this, meet that person, always on. And look, by the end of it, it was really hard. I sort of explained in the blog post, but I had a period in there where I just ended up in a terrible hotel with a workshop that didn't have the attendance that I'd expected, which also impacted my profitability out of it, which in my head was like, now I'm not making the best use of the time. And it'll be stuff like in the middle of that, I get up one morning and there's an email from my wife, and the photo is like my son with blood all over his face and his chin split open, and he's because he's crashed in the playground and he's off to get stitches, and stuff in the house has had dramas, and my wife's trying to fix it up whilst getting ready to go to surgery and get her back fixed. And it was just all this stuff sort of compounds, and there's very little you can do when you're on the other side of the world. In fact, when I was away in January, and I was away with you, Lars, as well in London, my wife's back gave way. She ended up in hospital for 6 days whilst I was on the other side of the world. And people sort of went, oh, should you go home? Should you just cancel it? And the problem is that not only do you make all these commitments, but it pays well when I'm away. And you're sort of looking at the context of saying, well, I would go away and or I could go home, and we would actually lose a very large amount of money. And my wife and I actually discussed it at the time and agreed that it didn't make sense because fortunately we had family help with the kids, but it meant that she had to go through all that without me there. And we decided together that was the right thing to do because it made more sense than cancelling everything and wearing a huge financial hit.
And can I just comment on that and say that whilst all this is happening while you're away, certainly, in your case and my case, I'm sure, you're not allowed to have a bad day. You have to, every time you meet someone for the first time, give them the same great experience, because that's why you're there. You're building a brand, you're providing a service, you're selling product, whatever it is you're doing, you have to do the best every time. So all these things that are happening and you can't do anything about, but are on your mind, you just kind of have to almost, as Joel said earlier, put your game face on, right? It's not always that simple.
Yeah, it's hard. And imagine, okay, it's a little bit different for us, but I imagine what it would be like for people that are really in the public eye. Say you're a news reporter or something like that. You can't go in and have a crap day. You've got to be on. You've got to be presentable. And this is the thing. I mean, a good example of that is after that keynote that you mentioned in NDC in Oslo around the middle of the year. I had a really big week. I lost my voice completely because I think I'd actually picked something up on the plane. Lars will remember he had to do a very entertaining talk, which was actually my talk, and he had to present the whole thing. We probably shouldn't mention what a lot of the contents was. It was a pub talk,
Let's not.
But I literally had no voice, and I had to go to London the next day, when it was a Sunday by then, and I had zero voice whatsoever, and I had to spend about 2 or 3 hours in the rain with Wired magazine doing a photo shoot for a story. And then I had 4 days of back-to-back workshop, and I had just enough voice to be able to talk. Not well, but I could talk. Then had to fly to Amsterdam, and then got a fever on that weekend because I was still recovering from this cold, but had to front up on Monday. And it was sort of the first time I'd done one of these trips and gone, what actually happens if I'm so bad that I'm either unable to talk or get out of bed or something like that? And it's on an event like that, it would have been cancel it, and then not invoice them and make as many apologies as I could, because it would be an enormous inconvenience on them, and it would just be a very unpleasant experience. So that's one of the reasons why I put so much effort into looking after myself while I'm away as well, because if it goes wrong, like, oh man, it's bad. And a lot of that blog post is about how much I was walking or what I was eating or how I was trying to sleep and sort of stay fit and healthy for 3 weeks in a row.
Absolutely, because I did a workshop in Oslo as well in May, And I'd just come from Belgium then, and it was the same thing. I'd caught a fever or something in Belgium, and I was completely out of it in Oslo. But there was this, did I cancel this 2-day workshop? There were people there that expected me to talk. There's the financial hit, so I just went to the local chemist, and I had literally like a medicine cabinet on the desk with my laptop when I was presenting.
So I got some years ago, actually, when I was still in a corporate role, I was in the Philippines for work, and I got sick there. I think it was seafood. It was, something I probably shouldn't have eaten in a place like the Philippines anyway. Got food poisoning there, and I'd had it before in Hong Kong as well. Like always places that are on the other side of the world, and particularly in the case of the Philippines, not quite as easy to just go down the chemist and be confident you're getting something that you would be happy taking. So I got sick on those occasions, and ever since then I've had like one toilet bag stuffed full of everything I could possibly need. I've got a checklist, and every now and then I go. It's like I go through security, and they open it, and they're looking at it, and I'm going, "Oh yes, about those. They're for medicinal purposes, all of them."
I need all of them. So how do you actually deal with this tall poppy syndrome? I want to just change the subject a little bit, because there are lots of people that just can't handle that someone is successful and they're not, and they need to take it out. And often it comes out as what is on the internet called trolling, and they become these angry people that just sit there and hum in your ear and tell you all this crap. How do you actually deal with it? What's some good advice on getting rid of these people or ignoring them or whatever? What do you do?
Look, I think the first thing is that just being entirely rational about it. We've got to acknowledge that everyone has different tolerances for how much they want to share and how visible they think success should be. And it's interesting, there are definitely cultural tolerances to this as well. And I've been told several times that some cultures have very distinct words, which is effectively means keep your head down and not show any sign of success. In other parts of the world, it's very much flaunted. And I think that in Australia, we're probably pretty middle of the road, I'd say. We're fairly down to earth about these things. But look, I don't have a lot of tolerance if someone is cranky because I drive a nice car or live in a nice house or fly in a good seat in the plane. It's not that I sit here non-stop going on about it. All right, I mean, I post a lot of beach photos. It's a beach, it's free. I go down to the beach. So there's that. But look, I think in cases like that, first of all, if you're the person unhappy about that, maybe tune out, stop following. There's always that, sort of self-censor. For those of us on the receiving end of it, I am increasingly just ignoring stuff. I think maybe I've gotten better at recognizing the signs very early on of when a conversation is not going to be productive. And admittedly, there are times where I engage because, frankly, look, sometimes I feel like an argument. It's like, mate, you're a dickhead. Here's why. And okay, it's not quite that blatant, but it'd be, I think sometimes there are ways of sort of laying out the facts and reasoning in a way of, are we really just distilling this down because you're unhappy that I have achieved something? And, I don't want to say that you haven't, but yeah, it just kind of looks that way. So look, it's just a sort of a sad state of affairs. And look, again, it'd be different if you're out there sort of flashing wads of cash around in your social media nonstop. But if it's a reflection of here is like normal everyday life and what we do, I don't have as much of a problem with that. And honestly, like I say, I think just tune out if you don't like it. Easy.
I would say that at least on social media, I follow a lot of people that I disagree with. I mean that I just flat out disagree with on a lot of things, and I do that sort of volitionally because I want to hear stuff that's not from my own little corner of the world, and in fact that's why I try to follow people from other countries that maybe I don't have anything in common with, but is for that same reason. And then on Twitter, if I figure if somebody ignores me, it's because they really like my idea and they want to use it.
It could be that. It could be so. Look, I mean, who knows? But I think that's actually a perfect illustration of the point about we've all got sort of our different tolerances and views. And look, I respect that there are a bunch of people out there that want to absorb this information, and there are a bunch of people that want to do anything from learn from you to live vicariously through you. And there are a bunch of people that are just assholes as well. Like the Twitter and the internet in many ways is a good representation of everyday life. And if you get exposed to enough people, there's going to be a portion of them that are negative. But what I would say, because it's easy to sort of dwell on these conversations about negativity, in total fairness, it is a small fraction of 1% of the people in the interactions I have that are negative in that way, to the point where they leave me feeling actually angry or upset. I had one last week because of a tall poppy sort of syndrome that probably pissed me off more than what I would normally be. And I just went, all right, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to set up a rule and block the guy. If he emails me, he can email me as angry as he likes. He's just going to be blocked, and I won't ever hear about it, and I'll go on with my life. And that's it. And so just filter out the noise and don't let it distract you from focusing on the important things.
Yeah, I exercise the same way. I don't get anywhere near as many trolls as you do, I would imagine, but I certainly just ignore people as well. And there are some people that I know if I read whatever they say, I will really get annoyed, so I don't. And I go on with my life. So, it's almost the end here, but what's next for you, Troy? What are you up to? Where can we find you? And is there anything interesting that we should know about that's coming up?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, actually. I really need to give that some thought. So, the next planned big things that I have coming up is I will be back in London for NDC London in January, along with you, Lars.
Yes.
And that will be sort of the next place that people can come and see me and do stuff. Between now and then, it's kind of a funny thing now, when you can sort of set your own schedule and decide what you want to do. I've got a lot of stuff I want to do with my Have I Been Pwned service, which is sort of ticking along there. I've got a lot of data I need to add, a lot of features I want to add. I've got a couple of Pluralsight courses in mind as well, and I'm just sort of figuring out when's the best time to do those. And a lot of blogging too. I've got a lot of blogs in draft. I'm going to hopefully finish today or tomorrow one on this new network setup using this Ubiquity gear, which I think people will like. It's probably been the most requested thing I've had from people to write about what I've been doing with this network, because it is really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, I'm really keen to see it.
Yeah, it will cost you money when you see it, I guarantee you. You'll turn around and go, yes, I need all of that now.
Well, that's fantastic. This is the segment of the show that is by far the most requested as well, and Joel knows this, and this is my joke. I got a really good one, Joel, actually. I think you actually appreciate this one.
Oh, I doubt it.
Well, I might even have two if you're lucky. How do you tell an introverted computer scientist from an extroverted computer scientist?
Oh, God.
An extroverted computer scientist looks at your shoes when he's talking to you. Oh, dear. I was speaking to the nerd of us.
Come on, Lars. You can do better than that.
I can do better than that. All right. So,
cheer me up.
This is one that's not in my... Why do Java programmers have to wear glasses? Because they don't see sharp. Oh, yeah.
I got a good Java one, but it's not suitable for a podcast.
Well, they're in there now, and I'm editing, so there. But no, I really want to say thanks for your time, Troy. We appreciate your input, and as you are our first guest on this show, you also have the first picture on the website, I believe. So that's a bit exciting, You might actually get somewhere if you keep doing this stuff.
Oh, boy. Okay, I'll look out for that.
Oh, dear. All right, you go shave or something, Joel, and I'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, I just want to point out for the record that we recorded this podcast on Skype, which I don't believe has end-to-end encryption. Not that matters, but...
This is true. Well, on that note, see you, gentlemen, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
This has been another episode of The Dane and The Pain with Joel and Lars. We look forward to having you back next time. And until then, toodaloo.